Hey friends, Carolyn here. If you enjoy listening in on our conversations each week about what's happening in the world of media and pop culture and how that impacts our larger culture, please head on over to patreon.com/femfreak and help us keep bringing FFR to you.
Remember, this show came out in 2016, and Trump was elected that year. And so I think a lot of us were so grateful for something like this in a moment that felt dire and bleak and literally was everything that we imagined it to be. Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by two of the biggest fans of the Chip Driver series of mystery novels, Carolyn Pettit.
Love those books.
And Ebony Adams.
Can't wait for the next one.
This week, we'll be talking about the final season of The Good Place. Here we are. I actually forgot. I was like, hey, Carol, what the fuck are the Chip Driver series of mystery novels? I was like,
not a true fan.
I clearly forgot about this reference.
Like, that's not even Easter egg level. That's straight up in the show, obvious.
I mean, he does solve the mystery by like the 10th page, so maybe calling them mystery novels is they're really
the mystery
more...
is why won't someone actually write them and put them right on my table?
Yeah, I mean, they're mystery novels / techno thriller / golf tutorials, so...
/ erotica.
This sounds amazing. I bet that... I just got a visual of like all of the self-published shit on Amazon that are just like people's fanfic weird novel
I'm
things.
all for that, but yeah.
But not the good stuff. Sorry, I know
right.
that sounded like I was denigrating fanfic, which I'm not, because Ebony and I are going to write a fanfic about
space vaping.
About space vaping.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
about Anita
yeah.
Yeah, Carol, I don't know if you're watching Picard, but Michelle
Rafi
plays. Yeah,
I
with the
love
space vape
the way
in her
she
space
vapes,
trailer.
The way she space vapes, it looks rad.
I know, right?
It
right?
totally
like,
glorifies space vaping, but I'm like, damn, she,
grow your own.
Yeah,
Exactly. All right. Well, let's do this. For 4 seasons, The Good Place expertly melded hilarious comedy with sincere explorations of what it means to be a good person. The core group of characters had a way of always being endearing and relatable, even when they were also being exasperating. And the show framed its moral explorations in a warm light that encouraged us as viewers to forgive the characters and ourselves for our moral slip-ups and shortcomings. Now, Michael Schor's series has come to an end, but not before one final season that asks some big questions about where the meaning in our lives come from and whether or not infinite, unending bliss is actually what we want. We're going to miss the show, so we wanted to bid farewell by talking about it here on Feminist Frequency Radio one last time.
Yeah. I am sad. I had not, when the show first started, like the first 2 seasons, I was that person who was watching it like the minute it aired, like week on week. And then in seasons 3 and 4, life kind of got away from me. So I would, catch up, binge, like mini binges and whatever. And I just don't think I was prepared for the ending and how much I would actually feel something. You know me, I run from real human emotion. But, there are some moments that I think we'll probably get into during the course of this episode where I was like, you know what? The show made me think, and it affirmed the way that I've been thinking about life and how I can navigate what I'm trying to do as a person, that I just thought was so very human. And I don't know. I don't have the words for it. Michael Schur and his amazing writer's room definitely did, but whatever. I'm going to miss the show is the point of that long-winded intro.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting the way that season 4 acknowledged how complicated life is today by using the point system as this means of sort of talking about how, well, today everything is so interconnected that, even a nice gesture that you might try to do, because we live in this global, like, capitalist system, where, it's like there's no ethical consumption, right, under capitalism, where, like, anything you buy, you might totally inadvertently be, like, contributing to the exploitation of labor or what have you, like, and it's like impossible unless you live like Doug Fawcett, and you're just isolated and drink your own pee and whatever, and like grow everything you eat and all of that. It's like impossible to avoid ethically thorny, at the very least, kinds of situations, right? I really appreciated that aspect of this season, for one thing.
One thing that I love about Michael Schur's shows in general, so we're talking Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and The Good Place, is that and he's the creator of them, but obviously there are really talented people working in these writers' rooms that are bringing so much to the table. But what I love about them, and The Good Place is very much this, is that they're very subtly progressive. So there are these like little tiny ways that there are comments here and there that are just deeply progressive, but are also not alienating to people who might not be. And not that I think, not that I'm making a statement about how we should be talking about progressive politics, but I do really appreciate that in a show of this caliber and this way that we can, I think that entertainment is a way that we passively take in values and messages, right? And so if a show is subtly doing that for a very large population, I think that's great. And also with The Good Place, it is very much deeply rooted in commentary about what it means to be good, right? About philosophy, about engaging with these ideas. And so I love that. And I'm glad the show ended in a way that was solid, right? Like each season had this distinct arc, and each season when it ended, you're like, where can they possibly go from here? And they do something wild and zany that just works. And so I'm really happy that they're like, the time is over. Like, we have told the story we want to tell, and there's not anything, there doesn't need to be anything else. So it's leaving us with a really good feeling about the arc of this show, right? And being like, The Good Place was solid and amazing and wonderful. And I wish other shows took note.
Yeah. I mean, as much as my lizard brain would have loved 3 more seasons, if they had just continually, retread, like, we're actually in the bad place, or surprise, here's what you thought about this, but it's actually this, it would have diminished the important things the show was doing. And the show was funny and it was entertaining. It wasn't, it wasn't dry. I didn't feel as if I was being, taken to school. And yet, there were things, like the names of philosophers that I'd never heard of that I was like, you know what? I think I might actually check this out. Or I had not thought about like living an ethical life in this way. Or like the question of the afterlife. What does that actually mean to me? That, as you say, you got a little, like a spoonful of sugar, help the medicine go down. I will say, like, as much as I love this show, there were things that I don't think it questioned. The show is very white, like it's very white. And so there are ways in which things are posited as kind of like universals. And I'm like, this is a universal for a, like white, straight person, middle class person too. But my version of the afterlife, if it is peopled, with like a truly kind of representative crew from my life, if I'm truly going to be happy in the afterlife, it's not that white. Like it's not, and yet
I feel like this was sort of acknowledged early on, though, in terms of, like when you meet Chidi, we hear him speaking English with an American accent, but he's from Senegal.
Yeah, but originally. This is a problem, right? That and it's kind of a problem within the universe of the show and the meta universe for us as viewers, that if in fact, and I recognize that the show is fiction now, so please don't at me on this particular issue, but if indeed like the afterlife, the good place, the bad place, whatever, is full of more people of color, but you as a person see white people because that makes you more comfortable, or you hear English, that's a problem, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's not,
But also, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm being a dick right now. But
Anita, you don't have to. Did you learn nothing from The Good Place?
But it reminds me of the Star Trek translator.
Right.
Right, or like any of the shows that have translators
Yeah.
where you like you can communicate because you can hear in the language that you speak.
And yet that is created by living creatures. It's not some sort of like outside force, this order of the universe that has done this. Like, you know, whoever is responsible, the creatures responsible for the creation of the universal translator, as, you know, sciencey-wiancy as that is, of course, they would choose to have this functionality. But to have, you know, some presumably outside force dictating.
And that you wouldn't automatically understand everything all of a sudden.
Right. But again, but for me, the race is the main thing, as if like, you know, whiteness is kind of a holder or default or unraced thing, you know, but we never see that from the other side, right? Like we don't see Chidi or any of the other people of color looking around the good place or the bad place or the medium place and being like, oh yeah, it's all black people, it's all Latinx people or whatever. Even just that kind of acknowledgement would have been something, but we never get that. So yeah, that was part of it. Also, another thing that we get some hints at, but we don't really get explored, and I think the show could have done it. It was certainly smart enough to. The ways that behaving as a good person, according to ethical laws, is contingent upon where you are in life, right? So the decisions you make as a person who lives in Libya, you know, are different from the choices you make if you grow up in rural China versus somewhere else. Like, it would have been nice to have some sort of acknowledgement of that too. You know, like, what is...
That is not a universal point system
Exactly,
that is culturally
exactly.
relevant.
Yeah.
In all the ways that means.
Yeah, but again, like I said, I love the show. I'm not...
Yeah.
The show cannot be all things to all people, but it can also not be simply, you know, white inflected all the time too.
Oh, sorry, Carol.
No, yeah. I mean, no, I agree. I agree with all of that. I did, you know, I think Brent, the character of Brent in season 4, I thought was a stroke of genius in that he did allow the show to spotlight here in the final season a particular kind of white male arrogance and I mean, I guess you could say that yes, the show is critiquing white men who think they're the center of the world, even as, to Ebony's point, it is sort of, the show is overall centering whiteness by default. So there is that kind of tension there. But, you know, I nonetheless thought that all the commentary that Brent allowed for was really fantastic. You know, Eleanor says, as they're sort of trying to figure out, like, who are these new these people that we have been given to improve and so on, like, guys like him think that the world revolves around them because it kind of does. Like, the show acknowledges that it's a larger systemic issue, and that Brent's perception that he is the center of the world is reinforced by everything around him in the world that tells him that he is the center of the world.
Yeah, and it's so insidious and so entrenched that at the end of the show, we see that Brent has not made it to the good place. You know, like everyone else we see has done the work that it requires to become better. But Brent is still like, okay, but if, you know, I give her a compliment that other women have liked or whatever he says, and you're like, this dude, is it possible that he's never going to get it? Like, it was pointed and barbed, and I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many great moments with Brent where he would do... he would do exactly the sort of thing that people like Brent do, and the show would react the way that we always want to react to that. Like, when they're all playing Pictionary, or whatever the Good Place equivalent of Pictionary is, and Chidi is in his usual anxiety-ridden state of indecision, and Brent says, "Just start drawing, my brother." And Simone, like, I was so grateful for the way Simone was. She was just like, "Oh no, like, because it was exactly. Like, it was exactly giving voice to my own cringe, the cringe that I was feeling inside myself at that exact moment in response to what Brent had said.
It's a great example of using comedy to actually critique instead of just comment on or point out, right? That like they're like, here's a thing that's racist and we're gonna tell you that, and it still like naturally flows and feels good. I think that that's kind of the magic of this show, is that it can make these big statements and do these larger commentary and critique of larger things while actually being entertaining and enjoyable, and you're just kind of going with it still,
Yeah. I loved the character of Simone. And to be honest, as much as I love Chidi and Eleanor individually, by the end, I was not sold on their kind of, eternal love for each other. The chemistry never was quite there for me. I felt as if my brain was okay with it, but my viewer's heart was never really there. I really kind of wanted, plus, that one of my things is I loved Eleanor and Chidi's relationship. Actually, I think Angelica Bastian, genius that she is, might have written something on this. I'll try and find it and post it in the show notes, about how there is something very important about media that does not uphold the notion of like heterosexual romantic relationships as an end goal. And so for Eleanor and Chidi to be such good friends should be enough. There should not have to be this kind of like central romance of the show, this one true love, soulmate kind of thing. And if there is, that's cool. But for me, it just didn't work with that particular couple. And speaking of like the, kind of overwhelming whiteness and middle classness of the show, it's also very straight,
Yeah.
It certainly is that, yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Though, and I, not to take anything away from what you just said, but, for me, I'm a romantic, right? I mean, I think we sort of know this. And
spoiler alert.
Yeah, and so for me, the way that the show was committed to, the way Chidi writes himself that note that says, there is no answer, but Eleanor is the answer. This idea, because I love that the show talks a lot about how a lot of the meaning in our lives comes from our connections with other people. And those don't have to be romantic connections, of course. They can be all familial and friendly. And of course, and the show, I think, recognizes that. But, I'm somebody who definitely really hopes to find a partnership at some point in my life. Like a partnership, I think, is something that is very, very important to me. And I think that, so I don't know. So for me, I was glad personally that the show came down on the side of saying it's okay to believe in the idea of a person whose just presence in your life is is a tremendous source of the meaning in your life. I think that there's a lot of cynicism around love and relationships nowadays, I guess, in a lot of media.
On this podcast.
And on this podcast. And so, for me to see a sincere affirming of the idea of that kind of commitment and importance to each other was I don't know. It was heartwarming and affirming to me personally.
Yeah, I totally get it. I guess I really liked Janet and Jason's kind of relationship, even though it was played for jokes in a lot of the ways, and it's completely inexplicable. And she's not a girl. As a side thing, as a sort of background feeling, their relationship worked for me. I don't know. I just, like I said, I love the idea of Chidi and Eleanor together, but it just never rung my bell.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So one of the things kind of related to this that I really liked is, so my experience was I caught up on 3 episodes and was like, holy shit, it's done. That's amazing. And then realized that there's another episode. So the second to last episode to me was solid enough that it could have just ended apparently. But then I was like, what the fuck are they going to do with a whole nother hour? And so what I loved was I love the commentary around having everything you want is boring.
Yeah.
I love what's her name playing Hypatia.
Lisa Kudrow, yeah.
Yes, which was amazing. And also, we write about Hypatia in our book, History versus Women. So pick up a copy.
Yeah.
But I love this idea of like, we've been here for so long and had everything we want that I don't know words anymore. Like the thinky book man and then the math. Is there math on my shirt? Like that shit I thought was really funny. And so, the very human-centered solution of an end
Right.
is really fascinating and interesting. And I really like that. So all of that to say is how each character found their piece. And that them describing this like, I've completed what I need to complete. I'm ready to go now. I really, really thought I thought it was very thoughtful in how the writers chose to do that. And I like that it wasn't related to romantic relationships, right? Like, I like that Chidi was like, I love you, but I'm done.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it just, and that Eleanor was like, I don't know what I'm like, I'm not satisfied yet. And I don't know what that means. Or, Jason being like, I played the most perfect game of Madden ever, but just all of that. I really liked that it wasn't related to other people, and it was very much about internal, like looking within yourself, finding peace or whatever. I mean, granted, the larger commentary, like, it's not like we have enough time to learn how to be make perfect Danish lines and chairs and like repave a driveway or whatever, but like, that our happiness and our satisfaction in life does not come from other people, while also recognizing that we are creatures of community, and that, the whole, I'm rambling, sorry, but the whole bit where Eleanor is talking to, what's her name, Melanie or Tiffany, whatever.
From the Medium Place?
Yeah. Some 80s name.
Yeah.
Anyways, she's talking to her and being like, you are like me if I didn't have friends.
Yeah.
So both you find internal tranquility, and also how important it is to have people in your life and people that are influencing you in positive ways and helping you grow and be better. So I fucking love this show so much.
I did too.
And the ending was so perfect.
I really, when Jason, like, Manny Jason is such a deceptively fine actor. And the look on his face when we realize that he's, come to the realization, like, okay, I think I'm done. And yes, it's funny because, it is because he finally played the perfect game of Madden, but but when he's done and you just think, I've watched this character grow over the course of 4 seasons, and achieve a kind of peace and contentment that I really do. I'm so glad that he has achieved, but knowing that moment in the episode that, like, oh yeah, this is it for them, Team Cockroach forever, but they're not going to walk through that doorway hand in hand, all 4 of them, or 6 if you count Michael and Janet as well. This is the end of this time, and yeah, it was just so bittersweet. But Chidi's really just the way he decides. When we learned that, like, he stayed longer, that he actually had the realization, way before he tells Eleanor. But then it's just finally too much. Oh God, my heart.
Please tell me that calendar is available somewhere.
The Chidi calendar.
They have to have made that and sold it,
if
right?
there's not an official version, I guarantee you there's 16 versions on Etsy,
Yeah.
Right
oh
now.
My God. Also, there's so many small references that, like, if you don't know them, they pass you by. But if you do know them, you're like, holy shit. So there's a moment when when Michael finds out that the committee has been disbanded, and she comes out in, like, a towel, and she was obviously, like, working out. Yeah. She's wearing a t-shirt that says East Still in Lions, which is a Friday Night Lights reference. Aww. It's just such a random, like...
She loves her TV.
She does.
Totally.
She does.
But, like, that was clearly someone's either on the writing staff or a costume or whatever is like, I like this show and I want to shout it out.
Oh yeah, I mean, just like that, everyone knows the signage on the show, from like the names of restaurants and boutiques and stuff. There's so much, like, the show. It does feel as if there's deliberate thought at many layers. It's not just that surface layer, but there are implications to things, and there's callbacks and allusions to things. So at the end of this, when, Michael achieves his dream of becoming a real boy, and it's Michael, a real man. Like in an earlier episode, maybe in like season 1 or 2, he talks about how one of the things that he would love to have or experience as a human is having like a frequent flyer reward card. And so to have that come back in the very last episode, like I love that shit. I loved it.
And then when he's like, and also like, this is so cheesy, but it worked for me that like when Eleanor goes through the door and then her like her body like disbands into energy, and that energy then gets infused into humans again. And like, it was the cheesiest shit. And I swear to God, in any other show, I'd be like, oh, fuck off.
But it worked.
But in this one, I was like, oh, I'm so
and I mean, it's thematically appropriate for The Good Place too, because so Chidi talks to Eleanor on like one of their last nights together about the Eastern the idea of
the Buddhist philosophy
like
about
the
a
wave, and the wave like exists for a while, and then it becomes water again, but it was always water, and it's always been part of the ocean, and so it's kind of a visualization, I think, of that idea in a sense, right?
Yeah, totally. But it worked. There's the thing about it is the sincerity of the show is so heartwarming.
Yeah.
Right. And we've talked about sincerity a lot on this podcast because it's such a complicated thing in today's day and age, and it feels very vulnerable to be sincere. Right. But that the sincerity on this show is so heartwarming. Like, actually, remember, this show came out in 2016, like, and Trump was elected that year. And so I think a lot of us were so grateful for something like this in a moment that felt dire and bleak and literally was everything that we imagined it to be. And that this show has been around for like such dark, difficult politics, right? And there's something about it ending that's really sad in terms of the fact that this show gave us so much sincerity and hope and joy and lightheartedness and depth in this current climate, in this current environment,
Yeah, I just, like I said about feeling affirmed, there are times, I'm currently in one, where I just feel, to what you're saying, Anita, like such despair over what we can do. It seems as if the hurricane of shit that is imminent, in all of our lives. And if it's imminent, that only means that it hasn't hit us yet. And it has hit so many people, It just feels like, what can one person possibly do? The way that this show constantly suggests that what the one person can do is everything. Because that one person can connect with another person and can make this huge change. But also the idea that like goodness is some ineffable quality that you either have or you don't have is bullshit. The goodness is in what you attempt to do and what you do, but there's no like, I am a good person. And so if I do these X, Y, and Z shitty things, they somehow don't count. No, the consequences are real for that, and that you can practice being a good person. I just found like it's such a revolutionary and ultimately hopeful message that you can keep trying every single day, every single moment to be better than you were in the last moment. I love that we come out of the show feeling like, yeah, there's no, there are huge things that we cannot solve alone, but there are things that we individually can do.
Yeah. The stuff with people connecting with their families.
Yeah.
Hit a little bit for me in terms of like, oh, like you can have better relationships with family members or others that were difficult or challenging. Like the Tahani being like her and her sister bracing for this really awful reunion with her parents and them being like, oh my God, we love you. But more importantly, like they did the work to realize they had fucked up. Like it wasn't on Tahani and Jamila to be like, okay, we forgive you, without their parents having to do the work to be like, you know what, we were shitty to y'all, like, and
it took them a while. They clearly, Tahani and her sister have been in the good place together for a while. It took the parents a bit to get to that point. I appreciated that too.
Yeah, totally. And also like Chidi and Eleanor talking about like having dinner with their parents and the relationships between them and stuff. I just like, there was something kind of magical to me about, there was a part of me that's like, oh, that we should work on our shit here while we're still alive, whatever. But also like, I don't know. It just, it made me think about relationships and the strain of relationships, and are there ways to make those easier or like repair them and heal them? And the reality is like the way that the show did it is that like death changes you, and like it's a huge thing that happens that causes you to see your actions, which is not something you can just do.
Yeah.
Like if you have a shitty relationship with someone, you can't just be like, hey, I want to like make this better, if they also can't do that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, because the death that the characters experience on the show is symbolic, like, because the real death on the show is the when they go through the door at the end, I think, right? Like that's the thing that we all have to cross over, where we don't know what happens afterwards. So for me, it's like the death that takes them into the good place is like, if we're applying it to our own lives, like that's not, I don't know. I mean, you could look at it in a number of ways, obviously, but I do think that I don't think the show is saying that we can't make those changes and stuff, have some sort of transformative desire to improve ourselves or improve our relationship with others, like while we're here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally what it's saying. Like, I think they are absolutely saying that is a thing we can do.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just saying it's part of that like sincere optimism of the show, where when you start thinking about those relationships in your life, you're like, oh, that feels like a lot of work. And to Ebony's point, like not everyone is ready for that, right? If you have a difficult relationship with your parents,
oh yeah,
and it's them that is part of like a big bulk of their reason or their behaviors or whatever, they're not going to change because you watched a TV show that made you want to have a better relationship, right?
Yeah, but there is something comforting about like I've got a shitty relationship with my dad, and I don't see that there's a path towards reconciliation, and maybe there shouldn't be at this point, but it's not over when we die. The show pauses, and whether you actually believe that this occurs, it was comforting to be like, I still have this desire, and that desire is legitimate and it's authentic and it's human, and I just don't want this to be the end, and so maybe there's some kind of way to keep working on this once we the wave dissipates, but we're still in a state where we can this desire to be more whole and be better towards each other can exist. I really loved that for Tahani, because some of those scenes, as funny as they were, the way that her parents completely dismissed her in favor of her sister, they were hurtful.
Yeah.
It was hard to watch sometimes.
Oh, totally.
I think about the rest of the characters, and certainly as we learn more about Eleanor and her backstory and the way she essentially had to raise herself, that's also tough. But in terms of like family dynamics, it's a wonder that Tahani is as well adjusted as she is in life, and she isn't particularly well adjusted. But yeah, she went through some shit. I mean, poor little rich girl. I get it. Okay, but still, I felt something. All right.
You had feelings?
It's uncomfortable for me. I am definitely in the Brent camp. It's going to take me a while to get to the good place, y'all. But I will keep writing my erotica / handball tutorial / crime drama series, and I'll get there eventually. Mindy, yes.
Yeah, Mindy.
Good work.
I was just like cycling through 80s names,
This whole time in the background?
This whole time. I was thinking about Derek's floating head. That was amazing.
It was good. I have to say, like, whenever I think of Mindy, the fact that, at least for like the first 2 seasons, when she would always ask if people had cocaine was so good.
It never stopped being funny.
Never.
It was great.
Like, just as an kind of, 80s nod, it was so good just constantly asking people.
Yeah.
Do you have a hookup?
All right, y'all. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Excited to see what Michael Schur has next.
Yeah, get on that, dude. No breaks.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Carol? Sorry, I interrupted you.
I just want to, shout out the wonderful like throwaway jokes of The Good Place one last time. A big part of what made the show what it was is just its ability to just have little lines of a throwaway joke that was just hilarious. A few of my favorites from the final season were, there's a passing reference in The Bad Place among the demons to the performative wokeness department.
Yes.
Which I really appreciated. I loved that when Sean wanted a bad person's data, the person he finally settled on was PewDiePie.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And also it had what I think was, at least to me, a genuinely funny sexual harassment joke, which was a Bad Place demon when they have to go do something saying, I hope it's not more sexual harassment training. I'm already so good at it.
Yes.
I did. I really liked that.
Yeah.
I do also want to talk about like a lot of stuff that happened in the end with relationships. Like there was a lot of growth in a lot of them in ways that were really charming. So like Sean like being like, I want to be evil, but I just actually want to compete with you because that's more fun. Like the calling out of that. Michael, kind of having to be checked a little bit in terms of relinquishing space to what's her name, the other demon, to
Vicky
to create the test, right? Because she was really good at that, and him acknowledging that that's okay that somebody else is good at that. Like little things like that with characters that have been pretty like very entertaining but very like one-sided, right? Or like two-dimensional in some ways, even though very lovely. So I enjoyed those
Me
moments.
too. I never listened to the actor who plays Sean. What is his name? Mark Evan Jackson?
Don't know.
Anyways, he's got a podcast all about The Good Place, in which he hosts other actors from The Good Place, and they talk about the episodes and their characters and whatever. And I'm looking forward to listening to it. Now that the show is officially over, and kind of revisiting it, and certainly picking up on tons of things that I didn't pick up on first and second viewing. It's so nice to be able to relax into a piece of media in which that careful thought has gone into every decision, and that you have got smart people in the writer's room, actually hashing out ideas. I think, there's this notion that if you have this kind of like singular genius of a showrunner, that it is their singular vision that will end up on screen. This show has always felt very collaborative and multifaceted, both within the body of the show with the characters, but the different episodes, the different seasons have had different tones, and I think that's just a credit to the writers' room that Sure put together. So shout out.
I also want to say that while two of the actors have been around, like are known people in acting, wow, that Tahani, Janet, Jason, and Chidi were all relatively unknown with various levels of experience. I think this was Tahani's like real first, not her name, I forget her name, Jamila. Whatever.
Jamil, yeah.
Yeah. Was like her first, this might have been her actual like first acting gig. And like there's something really nice about a show taking off like this with such a green cast, and you can feel the camaraderie and spirit. I watched the little bit that plays after the final season where it's this roundtable conversation between them, and just the relationship and the care that they all had to like lift each other up and like teach each other different like acting stuff and all of that, I thought was really, really nice. And, we rely so much on big names to sell things that I liked that they all have lovely careers ahead of them from this.
The Good Place.
All right, y'all. We'll be right back with our weekly freakouts. Although I feel like that was just one big freakout.
It was. It was a quiet, sweet freakout.
Hey, FFR listeners, did you know that if you join our Patreon community, you can get nifty perks like early access, exclusive weekly bonus segments, access to our friendly Discord, and more? That's right, you can get cool stuff and help us keep doing FFR at the same time. What are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/femfreak.
What's your freak out?
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn, what do you got?
Okay, I'll
Would you like Ebony to go
I don't have a
first?
strong I don't have a strongly committed freak out this week. So
Do you want me to go first?
No. Okay. I'll just
Good, because the audience doesn't want that either.
So I will freak out about a film on the Criterion channel, obviously also available on Criterion, like Blu-ray, DVD, or whatever. But there's a film called Until the End of the World by Wim Wenders, who it's a film that was originally released. So it was, I think, shot and released in like 1993 or thereabouts. Released in the early 90s at around a 3-hour length. But the director felt that was an extremely like truncated version of the film that did not reflect, its true vision. So what Criterion has now finally released the director's full 5-hour vision for the film. And it's a sci-fi film, so it's sort of like Strange Days. It's a film that is set in 1999 when 1999 was a year in the future that had this air of like of both doom and transformative hope around it. Like what could that year mean, and what will it mean going into the year 2000 and everything. So it is a science fiction film that envisions a very distinctive, it has a very distinctive vision of what 1999 would be. That is, of course, it is not at all what 1999 actually was, but that is a lot of fun to witness. It is an epic road movie that and a big part for me of the pleasure of watching it is just seeing all the cities and the locations that the character's journey takes them to. It's just in my mind it feels a bit like going on a journey yourself, because you get such a wonderful array of locations that are so beautifully shot and and captured in the film. The film certainly has its problematic elements. So this is not a full pass for all aspects of the film by any stretch. But and I'm watching it like an hour a night, and I'm 3 hours through, so I've got 2 hours left to go. But it stars, among other people, it stars William Hurt and Sam Neill. And Sam Neill, boy, in the early 90s, man, there was something about Sam Neill. I
follow him on Twitter. I don't know if you do too, but he is a fucking delight.
Yeah, I see some of his animal. He loves his animals, and he's a very sweet and charming man. But God, he had a pretty special charisma, I think, on screen in the early 90s, and you definitely get some of that in this movie. Difficult plot to summarize, so I'm not even going to try to explain the plot. And it's not really a movie you watch for the plot anyway, so much as for the experience of the adventure and the globe hopping and all of that. But Until the End of the World, it's on the Criterion channel. Check it out.
Awesome. Ebony?
Well, I wanted to freak out about Atlantics, but we're going to be talking about that in an upcoming episode. So I will save my freak out. I will flesh out my freak out and then save it for that episode. But one of the things that I will be talking about in that episode, I hope at further length, is the look of the film. And so my freak out today is just about cinematography and directors of photography and how we should just be showering them with all of the accolades. It's pretty much one of the few categories I'll be giving a shit about at tonight's Oscars. We're recording this on the day the Oscars will be airing. I recently saw The Photograph, which is Stella McGee's new film with Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield, and various other amazing actors. Rob Morgan, who I would walk through fire for. I just think he is amazing.
Was it good?
It is good. It's not really my type of film, in that, as you know, And as I repeatedly exclaim, I don't like feeling things. So a film that asks me to feel things, I'm already suspicious. But what I absolutely loved about this movie, and Carol, I think you'll know what I'm talking about here, even though I'm going to stumble over my words. The DP for that film managed to evoke time and place in just a stunning way in certain scenes. Issa Rae is a beautiful woman, and Lakeith Stanfield has a face that is so interesting to look at. It is still true today that not as much care is taken in lighting, in particular, people of color, especially Black people, right? We get sort of washed out if we get anything. But a DP, a cinematographer, just that entire team on a film who can bring out like the luminous qualities of brown skin, it is so wonderful to watch. There's a quality of a kind of soft light in the photograph when Issa Rae is like walking down streets in New York. They reminded me so much of film in the 70s, just the texture of it, and the way things were framed, but particularly just the way that we can see everything about her face, and yet it's a very soft, not focus, but a soft light surrounding her. I just so loved. So yeah, I am freaking out about people who know how to light Black skin and shoot Black skin for the week. And like I said, I definitely want to talk about this. And when we talk about the Atlantics, there's this incredible scene where our lead character is in this nightclub, just kind of sitting on a couch in this loungy area, and these green lights are playing over her face. And I could have stared at that particular, image for hours. So that's what I'm freaking out about this week.
Nice.
DPs who know their shit.
Excellent. I am shouting out a book that I was staying with a friend in DC, and we were talking about food and traveling, and she's like, here, read this. It's a very short book. It's called Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. I'm so sorry that I said that completely wrong. Anyways, it's a Japanese book. It came out in 2016, won a bunch of awards, and it was translated into English in 2018. And this is the first book of hers that's been translated into English. It is weird. Like, it's just straight up weird.
Tell me more.
So it is about a young woman that works at a convenience store and is like, she is a part-time convenience store worker. Also, the author herself is a part-time convenience store worker. And the protagonist is a woman who has always felt like she doesn't understand how society works and is different from everybody else. So there's stories about her as a child doing things like physically harming someone else, but not understanding why that's a problem. And as she grows up, she starts working at this convenience store, and the rules of the convenience store are like her calling, right? There's a manual. She can learn, you wear certain clothing. Her identity is wrapped up in like understanding the weather patterns and what people buy based whether it's hot or cold. And you see her engage in the world by mimicking others' behaviors so people will like not treat her differently. Even though she doesn't actually care about fashion and she doesn't actually care about the things that some of the other people do. You watch her literally like chameleon herself in these spaces. And it sort of escalates because, there is a hugely cultural tradition around like, you should have a better job than that. And you also should get married, and you don't date and you don't like sex. I don't understand. Like, there's something very, very wrong with you. So she kind of like fakes her way in a situation to mimic these things, even though she doesn't care and she's happy being alone and working at a convenience store for the rest of her life. So it's weird. It's a very short read. It's very weird and interesting. And what I think I found engaging about it is that it's actually dealing with capitalism and patriarchy and like cultural social standards on a very micro level. It's not like a huge commentary on the world, but like when you distill it down, it's super, super micro, and you can like pull out those pieces if you're reading it that way.
It's very interesting. If this were a book by a Western writer, I think the assumption would be, oh, that character sounds as if she's on the spectrum.
That's exactly what I thought.
Right?
Yeah.
But this kind of forces you to confront the notion how many diagnoses are culturally determined based upon our expectations of appropriate behavior, and how you cannot simply, map that template onto someone else and say like, oh, well, she's clearly, autistic or has Asperger's or somewhere on the spectrum or whatever, right? Like we can't just make. That's interesting. I'm gonna check that book out.
It feels very, very spectrumy, like that there is something neuroatypical, and there is obviously with the character, but I don't think that was the intention. I think that the intention of the author was to just show, to illuminate and identify culture, like cultural norms, and being and engaging differently. And what that means. If you, and we're talking about a culture that is very specific. Yeah. Like Japanese culture is very rules based and very specific in terms of things. People who can speak better about it than I can. So anyways, super interesting.
We should end every episode like that. People can speak better.
I mean, that's true. Well, I don't know a ton about Japanese culture, but I do know some basics in terms of generally, like, I don't know enough for all of the nuances of the book, but I knew enough of it to understand why there's such a vehemence on marriage and career and in ways that are kind of a little bit different than American culture, even though we do have that here. It's describing what quote unquote American culture is super difficult because it's not one thing. And I find that comes up for me a lot when I'm traveling, especially through Europe, is there is like a cultural identity to different countries in a lot of ways, like a Swedish identity or like a Danish identity. That doesn't mean it's necessarily everyone in all time and all place, but anyways, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, this Danish identity is making crime procedurals that I'm into.
Okay, well, you can submit your own freak out at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the freaking after party, only available to backers of this podcast. You can learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. And you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreak. The show is engineered by Rob Para. Carrie Stimpson provides technical support, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Join us next week for another feminist dive into pop culture. Bye.
Bye.
Later.